It all began in a small Sicilian town on May 8, 1920. Patti, a place that might be unknown to many today, but after hearing this story, you'll never forget its name. Because this is where one of Italy's most intelligent and complex con artists was born, Michele Sindona. Michele was born into a very ordinary family. His father was a florist, but not just any florist, he made funeral wreaths. Imagine growing up with death and funerals all around you during your childhood. Could this have cast a shadow over Michele's life and drawn him into the dark world he later became involved in? Perhaps. Michele was quite different from other children. His mother was a housewife. In those days, women had little role in the workforce. They were expected to take care of the house, the children, and cook meals. Michele's father was the breadwinner, working outside to support the family. Michele's childhood unfolded in the narrow streets of Patti. Picture Sicily in those years: cobblestone streets, old stone houses, a warm Mediterranean climate, but also poverty and people struggling to make ends meet. Michele was a child who was deeply affected by this poverty. But unlike other children, he was always curious and eager to learn. You know how some children always want to discover new things? Michele was exactly that kind of child. Instead of playing games, he was a child who constantly calculated things in his head. He had a particular talent for numbers. Mathematics was like a playground for him. His abilities quickly caught the attention of his family and those around him. When Michele started school, he quickly became the teacher's favorite. In a small town like Patti, getting an education wasn't easy, especially if you came from a poor family. But Michele's intelligence and hard work made him stand out. He excelled in mathematics and economics, impressing everyone. His teachers predicted he would do great things in the future. But no one could have predicted what those great things would be. During his schooling, Michele learned more than just academic subjects. He learned about life. His family's poverty instilled in him a strong and ambitious character. Michele was determined never to be poor again. He wanted to be wealthy and powerful, and he was willing to do whatever it took to achieve that. Michele's youth was filled with grand dreams. He wanted to escape the narrow streets of Patti and move to the big cities. His dreams were too big for a small Sicilian town. By 1942, Michele had earned a law degree from the University of Messina. A law degree was a highly prestigious achievement in those days. But for Michele, it was just the beginning. He intended to use this degree to carve out a path for himself and take on much larger endeavors. Getting a legal education was a significant privilege at the time. Especially in a place like Sicily, having a law degree meant earning a respected position in society. But Michele didn't want to remain a mere lawyer. His ambitions were bigger. He wanted to escape the poverty and small-town life of Sicily and make a name for himself in Italy's major cities. Michele was determined, and he knew exactly what he needed to do. The post-war period was extremely difficult for Sicily. World War II had left Sicily in ruins. After the war, Sicily was mired in poverty and despair. But this period presented an opportunity for Michele. The post-war era is always filled with chaos and uncertainty, and chaos always creates new opportunities. In Sicily, the Mafia was an organization that knew how to take advantage of such opportunities. The American Mafia was re-establishing its old ties in Sicily. When American soldiers set foot in Sicily, the Mafia found a new space to operate. Michele began working with the Mafia during this time. At first, he handled simple tasks like transporting food. But Michele's intelligence and abilities didn't let him stay in these basic jobs for long. Michele quickly gained the Mafia's trust. His intelligence was ideal for expanding and making the Mafia's operations more profitable. But Michele didn't want to remain in Sicily. His goal was to move to Italy's major cities and take on even larger ventures, gaining more power. In the early 1950s, Michele left Sicily and moved to Milan. Milan was the economic heart of Italy at the time. Wealthy businessmen, industrialists, and bankers all gathered in Milan. If you wanted to do big things, there was no better place than Milan. Milan was a fresh start for Michele. In Milan, he reinvented himself. He was no longer just a lawyer, he became an advisor who helped the wealthy evade taxes. Tax evasion, it sounds bad even today, right? But back then, it was almost an art form, and Michele was a master of it. Swiss banks, tax havens like Liechtenstein, these were his playgrounds. He moved money around, hiding it without leaving a trace. Michele wasn't just hiding money, he was also growing it and directing it into more profitable investments. This was where you could see just how clever Michele was. He wasn't just hiding money, he was growing it and making more profitable investments. Michele's talents quickly caught the attention of the Mafia. The Mafia always needed someone as smart as him. Particularly, the American Mafia families had heard about Michele's skills. By 1957, Michele was chosen to launder millions of dollars from drug trafficking for the Gambino family, one of the most powerful Mafia families in America. Imagine managing millions of dollars in wealth, it's not a job just anyone can do. But for Michele, it was child's play. He laundered and hid money so effectively that the Mafia bosses gave him the nickname the Brain. This nickname clearly illustrated just how intelligent and strategic Michele was. During this process, Michele wasn't just laundering money, he was also growing these funds, generating even more profit for the Mafia. His strategic intelligence made him indispensable to the Mafia. But Michele wasn't doing this solely for the Mafia, he was also looking out for his own interests. He was always someone who put his own interests first, and while doing this work, he seized every opportunity to grow his own wealth. Michele's success reached its peak in the early 1960s. By this time, Michele had purchased his first bank. This was a major step for him. He had become not only a key figure in the Mafia but also an important player in the international banking world. During this period, Michele wasn't just managing banking operations, he was also using his strategic intelligence to generate significant profits. One of Michele's greatest achievements was his relationship with the Vatican Bank. Yes, you heard that right, the Vatican Bank. Even the Vatican trusted him. Through the Vatican Bank, Michele funneled millions of dollars into Swiss banks. During this time, he was engaged in major currency speculation, practically making money dance. He was so successful that in 1972, he purchased Franklin National Bank in America. This bank was one of the largest in the US at the time, and by acquiring it, Michele gained significant power on the international stage. Even the US ambassador at the time was impressed by him and named him Man of the Year. Imagine a financier for the Italian Mafia being named Man of the Year in America. It's truly incredible, isn't it? Michele's success during this period created a major buzz not only in the banking sector but also in the international financial world. He wasn't just laundering money for the Mafia, he was growing it and generating huge profits. Michele accumulated significant wealth during this time, both in Italy and America. But this wealth wasn't enough for him. Michele was always someone who wanted more, and this ambition would be one of the factors that led to his downfall. Michele's life took a major turn in 1974. That year, the world's financial markets were hit by a major crisis, and the banks Michele owned began to collapse. This collapse was a huge blow for him. The bankruptcy of Franklin National Bank was one of the events that led to Michele's downfall. But this wasn't just a financial crisis. The veil over Michele's years of dirty dealings began to lift. After the bankruptcy, Michele was gripped by panic. For him, this bankruptcy wasn't just a financial loss, it was a life-threatening situation. Michele had laundered vast amounts of money for the Mafia over the years, and losing this money posed a significant danger to him. Michele became even more dangerous during this time. He was determined to do whatever it took to get this situation under control. During this period, Michele decided to eliminate the lawyer investigating his bankruptcy, Giorgio Ambrosoli. Ambrosoli was someone who could expose Michele's years of dirty dealings, and Michele sought help from the Mafia to prevent this. In 1979, Giorgio Ambrosoli was murdered by Mafia hitmen in Milan. This murder was one of the events that led to Michele's downfall. Because with this murder, the veil over all of Michele's dirty dealings was completely lifted. Now everyone knew who Michele was and what kind of work he had been involved in. After the Ambrosoli murder, Michele was cornered. U.S. authorities charged Michele with 65 different crimes. Yes, 65 crimes. These included fraud, forgery, and perjury, among many others. In 1980, Michele was sentenced to 25 years in prison in America. But even this sentence didn't put an end to his dirty dealings. Italy requested his extradition, and in 1984, he was sent back to Italy. It seemed that everything was over for Michele. But there was one final turning point in his life. In 1986, while imprisoned in Italy, Michele made, or was forced to make, the biggest decision of his life. No one knows for sure. While in prison, he was poisoned with potassium cyanide mixed into his coffee. Yes, the man met his end either by his own hand or at the hands of others. But one thing is certain, Michele Sindona's life, intelligence, and dealings in the criminal world will never be forgotten. Michele Sindona's story truly reads like a movie script. With his intelligence, ambition, and machinations in the dark world, he became one of the most well-known figures in both the Mafia and the international banking world. But everything has a price, and Michele paid for his actions with his life. This story shows us just how complex and dangerous the criminal world can be. And no matter how smart you are, eventually, you'll have to answer for your actions. If this story has captivated you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video. See you in the next video.